Welcome back to Transformers Cyberverse. Yes, we are finally back with Season 3 of Transformers Cyberverse. Or as it's now called, Transformers Bumblebee Cyberverse Adventures. But before we get to the first episode of Season 3, let's quickly recap the previous two seasons. In Season 1, Bumblebee had lost his memory, but he quickly met up with Windblade, who helped him regain some of his memories while they searched for the other Autobots as well as the Allspark. After multiple run-ins with Slipstream and her Seekers, they eventually found Grimlock and later the Ark. They woke up and reunited with the other Autobots, but were soon greeted by the Decepticons arriving on Earth. Between Season 1 and 2, we had a bit of a time jump as the war between the Autobots and Decepticons continued. The humans learned of the Transformers, but we never really saw any of them other than one child riding in his family truckster. In Season 2, Optimus Prime and Megatron find the Allspark and its guardian Cheetor. But unfortunately, Starscream, who was thought to have been killed by Megatron, stole the Allspark for his own nefarious plans. He created an army of Scraplets, absorbed the Allspark, and offlined his own Seekers. But he was eventually defeated by Optimus Prime using the power of his own MacGuffin, the Matrix of Leadership. Managing to grab the Allspark, the Autobots left for Cybertron, but ended up having to take the long way due to Shockwave's deception. The Autobots had a few adventures on the way, but they eventually made it back home. But unfortunately, the Decepticons were there waiting for them. And that's it for our recap. Now, on to the first episode of this new season, The Battle for Cybertron, Part 1. We open up with Optimus Prime saying how everything in the universe transforms, which I guess is kind of true in a way. If you think about the conservation of mass, it says that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It only changes state. Think of like when you melt an ice cube. You still have the same amount of water, it's just that it's now a liquid instead of being a solid. But anyways, he recounts how he threw the Allspark through the space bridge. We then have our two flyers, Windblade and Jetfire, scouting Cybertron for Decepticons. Specifically, they were searching Iacon, Cybertron's capital, much of which has been destroyed, which seems to make Bumblebee very upset. But Cheetor reassures him that the Allspark can fix the damage, recounting the times they used it in the previous season. Optimus then gives another speech to his crew, followed by Windblade saying that she couldn't make contact with Chromia, making Optimus think that something's up. We then cut to Chromia and Perceptor, locked up in a cell. Perceptor, for the first time speaking in the series, even though we saw him way back in Episode 1, tells Chromia that she should have let the Decepticons deactivate him, yes, deactivate him because this is a kid's show, rather than giving them what they wanted. So, Chromia definitely was forced to make that call to the Autobots, and is not a traitor after all. Perceptor uses the lenses in his monocle to redirect the bar's laser into Chromia's restraint, freeing her, and she in turn frees him. But unfortunately, this burns out Percy's optics, meaning he's now blind. Chromia guides Perceptor down the hallway, and as they hide from a couple of patrolling Vehicons, we can see them pass by a statue of McAdam. Chromia and Percy are also hiding in front of another statue, but we don't really get a great look at it. But if McAdam is one of the original 13, as we suspect, I think it's safe to assume that this is probably another one of them. Perceptor then reveals that he has other methods of seeing, kind of like Daredevil, and he can see a tunnel behind the wall that they're in front of. After Chromia and Perceptor escape, they take cover from approaching Seekers, who look to be Dirge and Ramjet, who we last saw in the Cube episode. On their way to the communications array, the two are stopped by some Vehicons, and Perceptor sacrifices himself in order to let Chromia get away. Chromia, in her super cool Tron Cycle mode, is pursued by a couple generic Seekers. She manages to lose them, but we then see Laserbeak tailing her. She tries to warn the Ark, but Laserbeak interrupts her. She manages to knock out Laserbeak, but Papa Soundwave doesn't let her get away with hurting his little friend. We then cut to Cheetor communing with the Allspark. Bumblebee comes to get him, and the Allspark transforms into a little backpack for Cheetor. Oh my god, it's so cute! I want an Allspark backpack now. Just imagine how awesome that would be, especially with TFCon Orlando coming up. I mean, I was already planning to go to all the theme parks, some of which I was thinking of doing some subtle Transformers cosplay at, but if you're going to be carrying a backpack at the parks anyways, how cool would it be to have an Allspark backpack with you? Okay, well, back on the bridge, the Autobots are saying what they're looking forward to doing once they get back on Cybertron. Of course, Hot Rod just wants to race, Grimlock wants to throw one of his famous soirees, RC just wants to unpack her Earth souvenirs and relax, which definitely sounds like me after TFCon, and finally we have Drift.
I do, and it's been a long time coming. Trust me, Hot Rod. I'll make sure you're there.
Okay, that doesn't sound sinister at all. And finally, we close out the episode with Soundwave leading Chromia back to the Decepticon base when he is contacted by Shockwave. Turns out the Autobots have arrived to rescue Chromia, but Shockwave fires a laser grid around the Ark which cuts it into cubes like the hallway in the Resident Evil movie. And the ship, and presumably the Autobots on board, are all destroyed. Well, quite the way to end the first episode of Season 3, huh? Now that we've basically covered the summary of the episode, let's go back and pick out some of the more interesting details. In the opening monologue by Optimus Prime, he says he blames himself for the destruction of Cybertron. Again, like I said in the trailer analysis video, I wonder if this is leading to him making the ultimate sacrifice at some point in the series, like so many other Optimuses that came before him.
Oh, you Optimuses do love to sacrifice yourselves, don't you?
In a new scene added to the show's opener, we see this mysterious dark creature. I wonder if this is our first look at the Quintessons. Or maybe it's the other that we've heard so little about. In the same shot, we also have Optimus, Megatron, Hot Rod, Clobber, and Dead End grouped together. Dead End obviously being a new character we first learned about through the toys. And this all but confirms that he will be showing up in the cartoon. Also, it looks like Hot Rod might be sporting his black deco, which we've seen on his toys recently. So it looks like he might be getting that repaint in the show too. And it's good to see Clobber here too. I wonder if she'll be playing a bigger role in this season. When Optimus is giving his second speech of the episode, we can see Rack and Ruin, once again stacking boxes. When Perceptor is telling Chromia that she should have let Megatron deactivate him rather than risking the other Autobots, we can learn two things about his character. One is that he doesn't seem to be very emotional, kind of like animated Perceptor. But that's not to say he doesn't care about his fellow Autobots. On the contrary, he is ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good at a moment's notice, as we see him do with the Viacons later on. And while we're on the subject, the way Percy is able to take out a couple Viacons even while blind definitely reminds me of Daredevil. The fact that he also has this kind of radar sense and his red color scheme certainly doesn't hurt the comparison either. I wonder if this was a purposeful nod on the part of the writers. The two generic Seekers who chase Chromia, I'm pretty sure we've seen them before. We might have even seen them destroyed before, but until the writers actually give them names, I guess we're to assume they're just different Seekers that just so happen to look the same. Also, is it me or did anyone else find Laserbeak's flying animation a little bit janky? I think I would have preferred it if he just kept his wings straight, but maybe it was just a weird angle. And when Chromia knocked him out and he landed at Soundwave's feet, was anybody else expecting Laserbeak to revert to his tape cassette mode? Maybe Soundwave could have picked him up and safely tucked him into his chest. Maybe they just didn't have the time for that, because that surely would have opened him up to an attack by Chromia, thus prolonging their fight with each other, which wasn't really much of a fight at all. Soundwave simply knocked out Chromia in one blast. When Cheetor is communing with the Allspark, he says, "Whatever it takes, I am ready." This leads me to believe that something is going to happen to Cheetor. Perhaps once Cheetor brings the Allspark back to the well, Cybertron will be restored, but the Allspark itself will no longer require a Guardian, and Cheetor will be forced to rejoin the Allspark. Drift's creepy little answer to Hot Rod draws the obvious question. Is Drift actually still a Decepticon after all? Or did Hot Rod just leak lubricant in his morning Energon? Also, Hot Rod nicknames Drift Red Eyes, which kind of sounds like a racist slur you'd call a Decepticon. Maybe that's why Drift is seemingly upset. And finally, at the end, when we supposedly see the Ark destroyed, I suspect this is actually just an illusion put on by Shockwave. Remember how in the previous season, Shockwave used a similar hologram to make the Autobots think the space bridge was destroyed. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was the same case here. Well, those are my thoughts on the first episode of Season 3 of Transformers Cyberverse. Or, you know, Bumblebee Cyberverse Adventures. but I'll probably just keep referring to it as simply Cyberverse, because Transformers Bumblebee Cyberverse Adventures is quite a mouthful. As always, let me know your thoughts on this episode down in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and all that other fun YouTube stuff. And I'll see you back here soon for the Battle for Cybertron Part 2.